Hello and welcome to the 21st episode of the Money Startup Podcast. This is the personal finance podcast for all things finance for Australians all over the world. We know we have listeners in about 40 to 50 odd countries around the world, so including back here in Australia. So it's great to see that audience continuing to grow. And thank you to everyone who's tuning in today. By way of brief introduction, I'm Jarrad Brown, Senior Financial Advisor in Singapore, and joining me today is my friend and colleague, Will Cant in New South Wales. G'day, Will.
Hey, Jarrad. How's everything going today?
Not bad at all, mate. Not bad at all. We're down in Perth this week, so, adjusting to some of the cooler weather. It's, what are we, mid-August at the moment, so a lot colder than I'm used to in Singapore.
Well, at least the RBA have had an excellent rate cut recently, so at least that's the silver lining, I suppose. The colder weather might not be as great, but at least the interest rates are coming down, right?
Absolutely. It's always funny, obviously this one was expected. The last one was expected. Or sorry, let me rephrase. A cut was expected in July. It didn't come. A cut was expected in August. It did. It's always quite fascinating just how many people wait for the rate cut to actually be announced to then go and do things, to go and buy, go and refinance, to go and upgrade the house as if it's going to make a material difference, given that additional repayment would have been for such a short period of time. But we're already seeing an influx of clients asking about what their borrowing power could be, what they should do with this news. Obviously it's good news for anyone with a mortgage to be paying a bit less. We've seen quite a number of lenders already pass it on. The big four certainly have, and I think the majority of others will kind of continue to follow suit, to be honest. But what are you hearing on the ground, Will, in terms of clients and people you're speaking to?
Yeah, well, look, it's an ever-changing process, I suppose, when it comes to debt and mortgages. But like you touched on, people always seem to sit on the fence and wait for that next card or wait for that next opportunity, as opposed to just taking action sooner rather than later. So I think the biggest cost I see with clients is inaction, right? And I think when we sit on the fence and just wait for these things to happen, you're just costing yourself dollars at the end of the day. So I think, moving forward with these types of things, looking at your debt, looking at refinancing as soon as it makes sense to is usually the best thing to do, not waiting for that next cut. But we do have, what is it, Jarrad, 2-3 more RBA meetings between now and the end of the year. So there is still potential for another cut as well. My advice to anyone listening, in a general sense, would be look at your debt now, look at refinancing now. If it's something that you've been considering, usually the best time to do it is yesterday.
Absolutely. That whole analysis paralysis where, it can be years, as I'm sure you do all the time. We meet Aussies all over the world, especially in expat land. Time moves so much faster. You're busy landing in the new country, you're packing up to move to the next country or take on the next job, or you're busy traveling. Obviously with expats, especially in regional roles, there's a huge amount of travel. And it can be years and years. And, we meet people, they're waiting for Sydney property prices to drop because, they're then going to be able to go and buy that place in Bronte for, 2 mil instead of 8. And years go by, we get the rate cut. And, all that's happened is they've missed 20, 30, 40% of upside, and they've really done nothing with their money in that time. So, I think you're exactly right. Just taking some action, having a clear plan in place, review your debt, review your options. I think most people have had their fixed rates already expire these days, but there'll still certainly be some fixed rates out there that are, 5-year fixed in the maybe high 2s, mid 3s, even some in the 4s. And even stuff like that, it's not the end of the world to be breaking fixed rates if it means you can then jump onto opportunities and whatever may be next to continue building wealth. So, it's certainly an interesting time. And obviously, rate cuts in Australia relative to, let's say the US, for example, may also, drive the Aussie dollar that little bit lower as well. So, it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts, Will, in terms of conversations you're having around the Aussie dollar, how clients are thinking about it, I guess, both back in Oz and overseas.
Well, look, the majority of people I'm speaking to are international at the moment, and they're all very happy and very positive. I was just speaking recently to a client who lives over in New York, And, he's been very happy for the last, 12, 18 months,
Mm.
sending money back and the exchange rate he's been getting. But yeah, look, it's an interesting space. I mean, when we look at the economists and the projections for the Australian dollar, it seems like they never get it right. I
Mm.
remember it was, around this time last year, all forecasts were telling us the Australian dollar was going to strengthen, towards
Mm.
the end of 2024, and it got substantially weaker. But look, I think it's, again, the same as the debt and the mortgage side of things. Take advantage of what's in front of you, capitalize on what's in front of you now, and don't sit around and wait for things to happen. It's a new financial year here in Australia. That's, we're a few months into it now. There's a lot of changes around that as well too, like superannuation. The guarantee rate's now 12%. There's contribution amounts are still at the same levels they were previous year, but these types of strategies where you can really capitalize on the low Australian dollar, if you are living overseas, it's things to just be doing now, acting on now, and making sure that your strategy is setting you up for that longer term, objective that you're trying to achieve, whether it's financial freedom or early retirement or, the new home or, what most people want, I suppose.
Mm. Yeah, super's a really interesting one. And I find, especially in countries like Singapore, Hong Kong, Dubai, for example, where capital gains tax, just doesn't exist. So you can go and invest your money in shares or ETFs, even Australian shares, which, a lot of people think that if they go and buy Aussie shares, they're going to pay Aussie tax, which is often not the case. But because of that, they often discount super as an alternative, because obviously within super, we pay tax up to 15%. But where I find the, I guess, biggest potential for that to go horribly wrong is people set aside these retirement savings while they're overseas. Let's say they're in Singapore, 5 years, they, build up a few $100,000, that kind of designed to be their quasi retirement savings. And then it's getting time to go back and they're jumping onto realestate.com or Domain, or they're talking to their buyer's agent. They're thinking, if I just bump up this upper limit that little bit further, and we just use that cash we set aside for our retirement, look at this beautiful home we could get into. And then they just start talking themselves into it. I would downsize one day, which is just complete garbage, because nobody will, they might downsize and move into something smaller, but it certainly won't be cheaper. And they just get used to a different lifestyle. And now they've done all the right things. They've done the disciplined savings while they've been abroad, and then just literally pissed it all away as soon as they jumped on the plane. So, I guess the key message there is, even though that super might actually, result in a slightly higher tax rate, don't ignore the power of actually locking that money away. Personally, I contribute a little bit to super. Both my wife and I, every year. I find it's just a good habit to get into. You need to be mindful of limits and the $500,000 concession limit and various other things there. But it's just a good habit to get into. And I know that, even with all the discipline of a financial advisor, that sort of option, I guess, of going and overspending on a house that we don't really need, just won't be an option because we can't
Yeah.
touch it. So yeah, I think it's a really important note that you raise. Whether you're
Yeah.
an expat or a resident, don't ignore this.
It's funny though, right? It's one of the best things about super, like you've just said, the fact that it's compulsory savings, forced savings, you can't touch it, it's for the sole purpose of your retirement. But it's also can be a massive disadvantage that you're locking that money away. But
Mm.
when we delve into the behavioral finance aspects of it, and us not being able to see that money, or not see it, but access that money, I should say, that restriction, it makes your retirement and that fund balance so much healthier by the time you do get to access that money.
Absolutely. Yeah, such an important one. And, I think had another interesting conversation with another new client yesterday, talking about how, their super balance was so much higher relative to the average Australian. And this is where I think we also need to be really careful with data, especially around super, is, the average Australian is overweight, broke, and retiring on nothing. So if that's what you want, that is absolutely fine. I don't imagine you're going to be listening to this podcast if that is your aspiration. But of course, that's absolutely fine if that is what you're after. But for the majority of our clients, we know that, they want a life that is much more fulfilling, much richer, and therefore requires, much greater financial planning and resources to actually achieve that. So
Yeah.
just be very careful with averages around superannuation and everything else for that matter.
Yeah, it's like the ASFA standard, right? The Australian Superannuation Funds Association have a standard that a comfortable retirement's about, I think it's 73 or 74 grand a year at the
Mm.
moment. I would heavily argue that's not a comfortable retirement. It's probably a very modest retirement. That's not going to really include international trips or, having nice dinners or just those things that, make retirement fun, and the things that you want to really be doing after working for 30 or 40 years. Well, Jarrad, let's get into it then. We've got an awesome interview today. Now, we didn't say this at the start, so we better say it now. Just a disclaimer for all of our listeners. The podcast is for educational purposes only. It is general advice only. So please don't race off the back of today's listen and make any drastic changes. Seek financial advice if you are thinking about, looking into your situation or making changes with your circumstances. Really, really excited for our podcast today. We're interviewing John Scott, who... the rap sheet for him is enormous. He's worked in reputation management. He's worked in the entertainment industry. He's worked for the Saudi Arabian government, with G20. He's just started his own business over in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So he's, a great listen and a great story. And he talks a lot about, reinventing yourself and the fact that you shouldn't be limited by certain beliefs you have of yourself and barriers, and really delves into that expat journey and how it changed his perspective, on himself and his career and how prosperous it's been for him. So I'm really, really excited for this one. It's a great interview we can get into today.
Let's dive in.
So as we touched on, everyone, we do have an excellent interview for you today. The one, the only John Scott. John has been working in marketing for over 3 decades, worked for government, I believe media personalities. John is on your resume as well too. In the entertainment industry, feels like there's nothing he hasn't done. It's in the marketing space. Currently living over in Saudi Arabia as well too, so has that expat knowledge and been an expat himself for quite a number of years. So really, really keen to dive into this one. And John, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Will. Thanks, Jarrad. It's a pleasure to be a guest on the show. I'm a big fan, actually.
Excellent. So John, tell us, give us a little bit of a high-level intro about yourself and, what made you make the move to Saudi Arabia in the first place.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting story, actually, because I'd had a very broad career in entertainment for some 25 years. And then as life has its twists and turns, unfortunately, my wife passed away from a very rare form of leukemia. And I had to pivot into a whole new world where I chose to leave the corporate world so I could really take care of my 2 young children who were 6 and 9 at the time. And I kind of worked part-time. I set up a couple of my own agencies. I'd worked in, as I said, entertainment. So I had a lot of contacts across the celebrity world. And I established an agency which pretty much looked after celebrities, and I specialized in reputation management. So I did that for some years. And then as these celebrities, very well-known Australians, became bigger and bigger internationally, my services were being less required. And I found myself almost out of jobs, but probably by the hand of my own good work, I like to say. So I then started to investigate what was happening in the digital world and came up with this idea that, using social media platforms like Facebook and Instagram, I came across these young people who were actually using those platforms to sell wares, to talk about themselves, to become specialists. So I thought there's something in this. And I set up the world's first social media agency. It was called Platform Me. So it's my fault that we're now burdened with these so-called influencers. But I did that for a period of time. It was very successful. It was an opportunity for me actually to educate the marketplace about a whole new way of doing business. And it was the first time I remember when I signed a client with Coca-Cola. It was the first time the head of marketing came to me and he said, we've never been able to connect directly with our end users, the consumers. We do these incredible advertisements. And he said, but we're still several steps away from the actual consumer. So that's, I guess, what, really influencers represented. And as I said, it was very successful. But after some time, I kind of thought, I don't know that I really want to be dealing with, people every day wanting to sell their wares on social media. And I decided I wanted to get back into the corporate world. So when I started to investigate that, was incredible, actually. I had applied for, in the course of 12 months, about 275 jobs, and I did not get one interview. And I was so frustrated. I went to an executive recruiter who had actually followed my career for many years. And I went to him, we had a coffee, and I said, what am I doing wrong? What is going on here? And he said, you're not doing anything wrong, but let me guess, the excuses are you're too old, you're too expensive, too glamorous, you'll get bored in these jobs. And he said, the reality is they're kind of looking at you going, why would I offer you a job where you could have my job in the next, 12 months or whatever it might be? He said, the only way you're going to find yourself employed in that corporate world again is to go overseas. So that was a bit confronting. I'd traveled internationally for work. I was the vice president of marketing for 20th Century Fox. I had an incredible career in entertainment that spanned the globe, but I'd never lived internationally. And by now my kids were, in university, they were quite self-sufficient. So I thought, you know what, it's time. And the very first job I applied for internationally was the vice president of consumer to consumer marketing for Dubai Tourism. And within 6 weeks of applying for that job, I was living in the Middle East. So the Middle East was always something that I was very curious about, and being able to go there in this incredible bustling city of Dubai, it was just amazing to me. And the very thought that somebody could put me in a job that I was not pigeonholed into, I was always known as the entertainment guy, and then suddenly to be given an opportunity where I was working in a completely different field, destination tourism, I'll be forever grateful for that. It was extraordinary. That's it in a nutshell, I guess.
It's such an interesting story. And look, I don't think you'll be able to disclose anything here, but I'm sure you've got some great stories. But now living in Saudi Arabia, you're running your own business. So what was the main driver between starting your business in Saudi Arabia as opposed to, working for someone else?
It's really interesting. Within a week of actually landing in Dubai, I had a call from a recruiter saying, I know you've just landed here, but I've got this incredible opportunity for you to work in Saudi Arabia. Would that be of interest to you? And I said, look, I just literally landed here. I've been here 1 week. I don't think that's a good idea at all, but what's the job? And it was for a project called the Red Sea Development Company. I was so curious. I said, look, thank you so much, but I really have got to give this a go. So the very next day I went into the office, and the Director General of Dubai Tourism called us all into a meeting, and he said, I want all you guys to be super diligent, on your best game. Have you seen the news? Saudi Arabia is coming after us. They are coming for our business. They've just announced this project. And my ears pricked up. I was like, okay, there's something going on here. So I started to really investigate all the change that was happening in Saudi. I have to say, to be honest, at first, I was probably as guilty as a lot of people about the preconceived notions of Saudi. I didn't know anything about it, but it did seem like a bit of a very mysterious place. And I couldn't imagine, living there and working there. But I did do a lot of research. And over the next 2 years, I did have a couple of more offers. And then I finally took the bullet when I was offered the opportunity to go there and head up the marketing communications for the G20. So again, it was an incredible example of people in a foreign country recognizing me as maybe an expert, but not pigeonholing me and giving me the opportunity to do something that was so far removed from, my experience in entertainment. And I headed up the Marcoms for the G20 in Saudi Arabia during 2020. So an incredible experience. Of course, that was the year of COVID, which was very interesting. The G20 is something that happens every year. It happens annually. It's hosted by one of the countries of the top 20 countries of the world. and then it moves on to somewhere else. But during our year, we really battled COVID on every level. So we went from having a live summit where all the world leaders were going to come in. Then it moved to a virtual summit. Then it went back to being a live summit until Donald Trump actually contracted COVID. And then everyone was like, if he can get it, forget it. We're not risking this. So we did achieve really great success that year. We raised $3 trillion, which was used towards developing countries and they're battling against COVID, drug development, so on and so forth. So given all of the difficulties that we had around that year, we did have really great success. And it does go down as one of the most successful G20 summits in history, which is great. Probably straight after 2008, where, the world was crashing down financially and the world came together and determined that we need to work together and build regulation that's really going to set the whole of the world on the right path. And I think that we really did achieve that in that year. What happened, though, during that year was that His Excellency, who managed that portfolio, said, anyone that can last to the end of this really difficult year, please let me know if you want to stay in the kingdom and I will get you the job that you want. And I put up my hand straight away and said, I want to move to NEOM. And I was, again, very fortunate. I was given the opportunity to go to NEOM. I headed up communications where we launched the line in the first iteration of the line when it was under the ground. And it was just an incredible, incredible opportunity to work on a project of that scale, the vision of it, His Royal Highness's vision. It just blows my mind how that man thinks. So I did that. And then following that, I was really, I guess, headhunted, for want of a better word, into other projects. I then moved on to a really cool project called The Rig, which is where an hospitality environment is being built on disbanded oil rigs in the middle of the Arabian Gulf. And then from there, I was given the opportunity to work directly with the minister, and I was the senior communications advisor to the Minister of Economy and Planning. So I did that for over a year, and then I sort of thought, what else can I do here? I'd been given, in my mind, I'd worked on some of the most exciting and really incredible jobs and been exposed to the machinations of a country that many people just did not get to experience. And it just started to play in my mind that maybe I could bring all of that experience together, my past experience, and set up my own agency, which I've done. So I started that at the start of the year. It's called the Intersection Advisory. And the whole premise of it in my mind is that it's for Saudi companies who want to expand on their messaging locally, regionally, and internationally. And then I work with international companies looking to move into the territory, and I help them kind of fast track that and come up with ways, strategies and ways that they can actually put their foot in the door of Saudi and start to build a business. There's obviously a lot of excitement about Saudi Arabia right now, so I feel like my timing is right. And the intersection in my mind is that sweet spot in the middle where East and the Middle East and the West can meet and hopefully have great impact.
Wow, quite the adventure, John. I guess just taking a step back from what you're doing now, I guess if we sort of rewind to when you're in Oz, and I mean, maybe even when you're in Dubai, obviously it sounds like the move to Dubai happened, rather quickly, over 6 weeks, you mentioned. How did you go about actually doing the research on, what life was like in both Saudi and Dubai before you actually made the move?
Yeah, good question. Because as I said, I'd moved around the world and spent large chunks of time in different countries working on different films and so on. But I'd never lived there. I'd never been in Expat. And I think I just went there with a very open mind. The Middle East, as I said earlier, was always very exotic to me. There was a real excitement about it to me. I knew that there were lots of resources, but I actually chose not to go down the path of talking to too many expats who are on the ground, because my approach was very much, if you're going to move to another country, for me, I wanted to immerse myself into the culture of that country. I did not want to live in a bubble of expats where I really didn't get to experience what a whole new environment can offer you on lots of levels. So I did a lot of research with regard to where do you live? What is the cost of living? How do you move around? And there's a lot of, again, misconceptions in the Middle East that, there's just loads of cash being handed out and you can buy a Rolls Royce and you can have drivers and maids. That does happen, but everything has a cost, even when you're earning tax-free dollars. I think you really do have a responsibility to how you spend those tax-free dollars. And Dubai was a really great steep learning curve for me in so many ways, because I hadn't lived internationally. I'd never lived in an Arab culture before. I'd never even met an Emirati or a Saudi before I lived in the Middle East. And it was a real eye-opener on so many levels. I think because of my experience in the film business and dealing with a lot of celebrities, the royal family and so on, I do have a good grasp of culture and protocols. So I didn't struggle with that at all. But there were lots of things to navigate. Opening a bank account is not easy. There's things that you have to have in place before you can open a bank account. What was my tax situation? Moving there and earning tax-free dollars, what impact was that going to have on me at home here? So I had a lot of support. I used a lot of resources to get the right information. Did I get it right straight away? Absolutely not. I have to Dubai is designed to make you spend your money. So the first few months were a lot of fun. And then you quickly realize it doesn't matter if you're getting taxed or you're earning tax-free dollars, it just disappears at the same rate. So, that was rectified pretty quickly. So I just did a lot of research. I asked the right questions of people. And I guess I've had success. It's been great for me.
That's brilliant. It's very eye-opening. And yeah, I think your comments about money disappearing very quickly is true of most expat hubs around the world.
Yeah.
Yes, a lot of them are designed to make you spend your money very, very quickly.
Yeah, for sure.
You mentioned cost of living there and spending a few times. Obviously, your relatively low tax rate compared to back in Australia for many of these expat hubs.
Yeah.
Could you sort of walk us through maybe any of the surprises, I guess, good or bad, in terms of cost of living when you did make the move to Saudi?
Yeah, for sure. So Saudi, for many, many years, the country was closed to foreigners. And on the very first trip, my first interview, which is, I've lived there nearly 7 years now. So this has been almost a 9-year journey. So 7 years ago, when I was first invited to interview for a role there, I had to have a letter of invitation from the Saudi government for me to even enter into the country. And that invitation was valid for a year, which was a great thing because it meant that I could move back and forward for interviews as I needed to. From very much the time I landed in Saudi, it was 1 week after all of the change happened, when His Royal Highness the Crown Prince, when he announced that women could drive, that women no longer needed to be chaperoned by a male. Those really important things when you're living day to day. But there was also an announcement very quickly that whilst it was income tax free, they were going to start imposing VAT on goods and services. So that was that moment where I went, damn, I should have negotiated harder. So, the cost of living in Saudi up until that point, honestly, was always considered it was very inexpensive to live in Saudi Arabia if you were lucky enough to get in there. Since COVID, we've seen, and since, the Vision 2030 mandate that His Royal Highness announced, we've seen a very steady raise in the cost of living because the ambition is to see Riyadh and the kingdom as a country on par with all the great countries in the world. So there's a lot of modeling that's done on countries, certainly the United Arab Emirates. Singapore is another model. So we're seeing that, yes, there's absolutely, whilst it's a little cheaper to live there, there's definitely things that are on par with other countries in the Middle East. So rent, for example, in the time that I've been there, over 7 years, my rent has doubled in a 7-year period. But to buy a house, which they're now opening up to expats, there's great opportunities to buy very well at decent prices. So, the ambition is for the kingdom to be recognized as one of the big countries and powerhouse economies of the world. And of course, with that comes cost of living.
And it's so interesting, the tax environment in Saudi Arabia when compared to here in Australia. In Australia, our top tax rate's at 47%, including Medicare. And Saudi, you can make that money with zero tax on the income. So, if you had to give some advice, John, to other expats, maybe moving to Saudi Arabia or becoming an expat for the first time, what would you say are the main financial planning considerations that they would need to consider when working in a tax-free environment?
Yeah, great question. And again, to be honest, when I first got there, all this money, it was like, wow, this is incredible. How have I ever lived before this? And then, as I said, I quickly did get much more fiscally responsible around those tax-free dollars. And again, my number one advice, and, sometimes you can beat yourself up. I think to myself, I really should have got this earlier. You should consult a professional, like I've done with you, Will. And, that is, you can't know everything. When you are an expat, you're incredibly busy. The hours are really long. They absolutely get their money's worth out of you. That's the other thing. You might get tax-free dollars, but you work hard and you work long. So to actually get the support and advice of experts, I think is critical. And I probably should have done it much earlier than I did. Because, the first 2 years, I was not even really aware that we don't have a tax treaty. Australia does not have a tax treaty with these companies in the Middle East. And it meant that I had to work for 2 years before I could be a non-tax paying resident of Australia, where I could really take advantage of not having to pay tax in the environment. And again, excuse my ignorance, in that time, that could have changed again. So please don't, take this as gospel. The point is, you have to do your homework. You have to work with experts who know exactly what those changes are from a regulatory point of view in each of the environments, both Australia and whatever country it is that you land in.
I say it about everything. If you're going to do anything serious, get a coach, get someone to guide you. And if you want to be fit, get a personal trainer. If you want to, anything you're going to do seriously, you're having someone in your corner that's professional can guide you is such a big value add. How do you go, John? Looking at the currency exposure. So, obviously working in Saudi Arabia, being paid there, sending money back to Australia, or, if you're traveling or anything like that. How do you find that, in Saudi Arabia with that currency risk and transferring money?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I've been very fortunate in that I've earned great money there, and the banking system in Saudi is very competitive. So I've been able to find a bank where all of the cost of transfer was rebated back to me. So being able to send money back into the country has not cost me anything, because it does come back. It can come back depending on your bank in lots of ways. It can come back in vouchers. In my case, it gets reimbursed. Not 100%, but I'd say it's about 90% of it. So that's been really cost effective. The other thing that's really to be aware of is the actual exchange rate from a currency point of view. You can get really obsessed with it. Like, what's the rate today? Oh my God, the coffee cost me $2 extra last week. What am I doing? Or, $2 less last week, I should say. So you've really got to get into the mindset that you earn in a currency and you spend in a currency. And it took me a long time to do that. I was always calculating, okay, if I spend 100 SAR, "Ooh, that's really $30." And I was living in this really, 1 foot in each pond kind of world, and it's just too time consuming. You really have to just say, I'm earning this currency, I'm spending this currency. Hopefully I'm in a situation where I can send money back to my superannuation or, whatever your situation is. And sometimes you just got to cop it, and other times you'll have a win. I think we're really lucky in Australia in the time that I've been here. The currency, the exchange rate has not been, fluctuating up and down a lot. COVID had a little bit of impact, and that was a big win. But then it's stabilized, and it's been pretty stable the whole time that I've been here, to be honest. Yeah.
I love that quote. Sometimes you get a win and sometimes you just have to cop it.
Yeah, it's true. Hopefully there's more wins than anything else. Sorry.
Yeah, spot on.
Yeah.
I think expats often like to become foreign exchange traders, and especially if you've only been overseas for a little while, sometimes you just need to zoom out a little bit.
Yeah.
We see it a lot in Singapore. That was $1.21 last week, and now it's only $1.19.
Yeah.
Well, when I moved there, it was 84 cents. So anything that starts with a dollar looks pretty damn good. So,
Yeah. And that's the thing. Everyone's got a story, right? And I remember a time when I was working in the film business and, there were Australians living in Los Angeles when the exchange rate meant that when they sent a dollar home, they were getting two. So it's like you sort of hold on to those things and think, it's not that great now. Maybe it'll change. But you just can't live like that. You really cannot. You'd go mad, actually, and you'd be crippled because, like I said, the hours are relentless. There's plenty of other things to worry about. And at the very end of the day, you do need to, seek the counsel of experts who can fill those gaps if they come about, or give you the advice that, will make a difference around that kind of thinking.
Absolutely. Could you, obviously you mentioned your bank sort of rebating some of those foreign exchange fees, which is both rare and obviously excellent news.
Yeah.
But could you walk us through maybe some of the challenges, if you faced any challenges, I guess, in getting your banking set up when you first arrived in Saudi as a foreigner, effectively entering Saudi Arabia?
I have to say I've been incredibly lucky with that. I moved into very senior roles where, and this sounds so expat bratty, but there was always somebody to really help and support that. I also worked in levels of government where sometimes you would hear stories where things would just take forever, but because of the kind of work that I was doing, things were really sped up for me. So setting up a bank account, you can't do that until you have an Iqama or a residency in that country. And there's stories of people waiting, 6, 8, 12 weeks for that to happen. Mine was fast tracked, so I was able to do that really quickly. Banks are very keen to get the business of expats because often it is, big salaries going into those accounts. So my experience was good, but I've heard some pretty tricky stories.
Certainly. Yeah, I guess we get sort of used to a certain way of doing things in Australia. And I think sometimes we forget that with an Australian passport, of course, things are much easier in Australia. But if you don't have that Australian passport, may not necessarily be the case.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, John, obviously you've been down the path of establishing your own setup over there. Could you walk us through, maybe some of that process, maybe the hurdles, how you actually went about, deciding that was the right way to go, and I guess B, more importantly, actually making it all happen?
Yeah, it's interesting because within the first project, after that G20 year, I had lots that you really did expose me to so many people in the kingdom, different industries. I met incredible people in that year just because of the kind of, the project that it was. Excuse me. So people then were saying, why don't you do your own thing? I will be your partner in it, because the reality is, if you want to do a business in the Middle East, in Saudi Arabia, you have to have a local partner. That's the regulatory framework that you're working with right now. At that time, I just didn't feel that was the right move for me. So it's after I've gathered more experience and probably got a lot more confident and realized that this is where I want to be. I want to live in the kingdom, that I started to explore it. And I have a really great person that I've worked with before, but he came to me and said, I will be the silent partner in your business. He's a local. So I have been able to set up a company that is 100% regulated. And he's a silent partner. And then between us, we have an agreement that sees me as the head of this particular company, the Intersection Advisory. There's other ways in, of course, and the regulation is changing often. There is a lot of regulation around setting up business there. If you want to be a foreign company and move into the kingdom, you have to do things like you have to invest heavily in staffing using locals. You have to have Saudi employees. You have to have an office space. There's a lot of regulatory framework that you have to pay for, the registration of company registrations, VAT registration, all of that comes with a price. And then, of course, you have to have legal advice, which also comes at a price. So that's one of the benefits that my company, being local, is able to do. Offer those companies who are exploring working in the kingdom, because I'm fully registered, they're able to work with me under a licensing agreement. And then we move forward in a joint partnership, and we're able to pitch for the various businesses that they're attracted to, depending on their industry. So it's all very legitimate. And the beauty is that the regulation is changing constantly. The ambition for Saudi is to be an international business hub. They want to rival the likes of Dubai, absolutely. They want to, really be recognized in the Middle East as a step closer to Europe. Fascinatingly, 75% of the world is within 5.5 hours from Riyadh. So, there's a big opportunity from a business point of view to really expand on that footprint. And the country is very rapidly changing regulation to make it as easy as possible for companies to set up there. So it has been very, good timing from my point of view. I wish I could say I sat there and was very strategic about the timing. There's been a lot of luck as well.
Well, there you go, Jarrad. When we start to get some big sponsorship deals for the podcast, we can incorporate it in Saudi Arabia. Sounds like it's getting easier and easier to do.
It really is. I mean, it was a really hard rule. If you wanted to do business there, you have to set up a regional headquarters. There's no question about it. Now we're starting to see that, yes, that's still the preferred way to go. But if you're a small to medium enterprise that's in a really niche area, the kingdom will still welcome you and say, we'd love to work with you and we're going to make it a little bit easier for you. It's always, the whole ideal of it is to expose countries to the opportunity of doing business in the kingdom. And I think one of the other things which I'll touch on now is there's a real naivety. I'm seeing a lot of companies coming thinking that, we can do this and we can do that. The nuance of doing business in the Middle East is very, very different to the West. And, I always say the West is not best. And sometimes it's really important to just sit back, listen, observe, always be respectful, of course, which should be in any business environment. We'd hope for that. But there's a lot to learn in the Middle East about doing business, for sure.
So did you have any capital requirements, setting the business up in Saudi Arabia, and how'd you handle those?
Yeah, so I didn't really. When you open a business, you want some cash in the business to make sure. But my approach has been really low from the point of view of the tools I need. I'm not in manufacturing. This is the tool, and what I'm offering is strategy. And you can't just buy that off the shelf. So, the cost of setup was very, very limited for me. It really was just about those regulatory requirements around licensing, registration, so on and so forth. And it's not exorbitant by any means. It's very,
Yeah.
very within reach.
Yeah. Well, look, you said too, John, like you're the intersection with your business between, the West and the Middle East. Do you find there's any, major business etiquette differences or, when you're negotiating client relationships, is there any, anything that you need to be aware of in that space?
Yeah, I think Saudis are incredibly friendly and they're very curious. So you'll always be welcomed. They will always take meetings. It might be difficult to get to the right person because there is definitely a layered system of executives in the kingdom. But the first 20 minutes of the conversation in any environment will always be, how are you? How's your family? Have you been here before? Have you seen this? Because they're so proud. They're incredibly proud people. And the fact that a Westerner or foreigner wants to potentially come and do business with them, it's a real opportunity to, expand that sense of pride that they have. And the uniqueness of it. This is a country that was closed for so many years. There's a number of reasons why it was. But the opportunity to actually go out to the world and say, look what we did, and there's incredible achievements in the kingdom. They really do, take that on very seriously. So, super friendly, very curious, but do not speak about money in the first meeting. It will go down like a lead balloon. So you don't go in saying, this is what it will cost you, or this is how much money I can make you. Not interested. It takes several meetings to really build up the trust of that relationship where you're talking about money. Yeah, for sure.
Very fascinating.
Mm.
John, you've mentioned a couple of times around the importance of engaging professionals around your personal finances.
Yeah.
But have you found sort of value being added in professional service providers you've engaged over there in setting up your business or, I guess some of the processes that have been involved?
Yeah, there's incredible, when it was decided that the kingdom was opening up and we wanted big multinational companies set up business here, a lot of entities were set up to support that process. And one thing that blows my mind here is the level of digitization in that process. So you're not having to make appointments and sit around tables talking to strangers about what you want to do and filling in 50 different forms. It's all done online and the speed of it is incredible. It's very, very fast. So to register my company, for example, I think it took 2 days. The turnaround was 2 days and I had a company registration number and I was good to go to do business. So that's one of the big bonuses for a small to medium enterprise like myself, obviously. But even when you want to come in and set up a big multinational office, set up a regional headquarters, the Ministry of Investment is incredibly helpful. They will negotiate for you. They will do anything that will make that transition into the kingdom appealing, firstly, for everybody, but easy. They really want it to be easy because probably over the years there's been a rap that it's difficult to get set up, that it's difficult to do business there because of that nuance. So now the ambition is to make it as simple as possible. And there's a lot of companies who have popped up now. And they are really, I call them hand holders. You can go to those companies and they will just walk you through the whole arrangement of setting up your business, and you'll be pointed in the direction of preferred suppliers, leasing arrangements, understanding contracts. It's a very, very helpful system for sure.
Mm. And I guess I'm not sure if you've been through the process yourself or you're planning to sort of hire and expand the team, but could you sort of share any insights, either you've had personally or anecdotally around hiring, what the sort of local workforce is like,
Yep.
maybe how that compares to Australia. We'll keep it as diplomatic as you wish. But yeah, just I guess any sort of comparisons and insights you found having been there for a number of years now.
Yeah, for sure. So what I've experienced is what I call the renaissance, really, of business. There's a few things. Firstly, 73% of the population of the kingdom is under the age of 35 years old. So it's a really young country. On top of that, a huge percentage of that youth, that we'll call them, they were given the opportunity to be educated internationally. So the government said any school leaver can go to the university of their choice. The government will cover all their tuition fees. They will accommodate them and pay them a per diem so that they can just focus on getting, whatever their interest was, getting their degree sorted. So now what we're seeing is this incredible influx of very highly educated young Saudis with incredible degrees and specialty degrees, masters, all coming back into the country and being given really great opportunities in companies, in government and private enterprise, but not having the experience. So it's there's a program called Saudiization, which puts Saudis first, and I think that's incredible. And every country should have the same kind of approach to industrialization. When you're bringing people into the workforce, your countrymen should go before anyone. But because of the lack of work experience and lack of expertise in some fields, that's where expats are given the opportunity to come in. I approach it very much that I want to work with young Saudis. I want to show them, share my experience and, dare I say, wisdom around doing business. And nothing makes me happier than when I step away and a young Saudi moves into the role that I had. That's always been my ambition in the kingdom. And I think that, there is going to be a time where expats will become less, and we're going to have an incredibly powerful workforce in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, highly skilled, highly knowledgeable, and a really great, hungry work ethic to do better. And that sense of pride also comes into play with young Saudis. If they get a job in the government, their chests are bursting with pride. Their families are incredibly proud that these young people are moving into roles that they may never have thought of themselves as families. So that level of expansion around the workforce is exciting. And then, of course, the amount of women who are moving into the workforce. One thing that I'm really proud about, I know I can come across like I swallowed the Kool-Aid, but I think that the approach to women in the workforce is really exciting. The number of women in the last 5 years that have entered the workforce is extraordinary. And without question, there is parity of pay. So if you sit beside a male doing the same job, you will be getting the same pay as him. There's a lot of things that have been put into place over the last 5 years that really do encourage, women to move into the workforce, for young Saudis to take on opportunities that would never have been afforded to them before. It's a very exciting time.
Yeah, definitely changed a lot, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's every day, Joe. Honestly, from the time I've been there to now, the evolution is staggering and the speed is incredible. Really
Well, John,
is.
just as a final question and a bit of a two-part question,
Mm.
what would you do differently if you had the chance to start over, move into Saudi Arabia, or, with your journeys? Anything you'd do differently? And then from that, what advice would you give, Australian expats who are considering that leap to move over to Saudi Arabia or any other country and potentially, being an entrepreneur and starting their own business?
Okay, I'm going to answer the second question first. I would absolutely engage the services of a professional company to support you with all the financial decision making as you take on that journey. How will it impact if you're going to put people in your residential home in Australia and you're renting it out? What impact does that have? Because I think that there's a lot of naivety, and all people think about is this, I'm going to be earning tax-free dollars. It can be a really slippery slope because there is a lot of regulation. And the more that, this is my observation, the more that people are curious about moving into, particularly into Saudi Arabia, there's going to be more pressure probably from the Australian government to have a really good look at what's going on here and how can we claw some of that back. So that would be my number one. Speak to Ally Wealth, actually. Number two.
Good plug.
Number two would be to consult the services of the Intersection Advisory. All jokes aside, do your homework. Absolutely. Find the right place to live. Am I bringing children into the environment? Schooling is critical and probably the biggest bugbear of young families, just finding that level of education. Without question, we have a great standard of education in Australia, and you have to look for it in other parts of the world. So definitely do that. Housing, do your homework. Don't over budget. You can fall into the trap of getting huge villas. You still have to furnish them. So, you've got to be sensible about it. So that's my strong advice. What would I do differently? I can honestly say that this experience, this journey that I've been on for, this period of time, nearly 9 years, including Dubai, I would not change a thing. Whilst I couldn't get a job here in Australia, I will not say that I didn't have a great career. I built an incredible career here and internationally. I always think that year was a bit of a glitch in the system, but everything works out in the end. And I've been given opportunities in the Middle East that I would never have been given. The opportunity to reinvent yourself, to reposition yourself as someone who, can do lots of things and not just be the film or entertainment guy. I'll always be grateful for that. So yeah, there's nothing I would change, not at all. When I look forward to the coming years, I think there's so much more opportunity. I think that I'm really, really lucky to be where I am at this time in my career and in my life, because we'll never see it again. I can't think of another country that is going to evolve at the rate that Saudi Arabia is and give the opportunities to the people of its own country that they are. So I think to be there and witness that it's extraordinary.
Yeah, very inspiring and very motivating as well. Like, we speak to a lot of people who they're thinking about making the move, or they're starting to dabble in the idea of the thought. And, sometimes people just need to take that leap of faith. And, hearing a story like yours just shows you that taking that leap of faith can really, really pay off in more ways than one. There's the monetary side of it. And there's, as you said, reinventing yourself and feeling invigorated and all of those other aspects as well.
Yeah, for sure. It's been fantastic. Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, John, for the interview today. There's a lot of gold nuggets in there for anyone listening or anyone thinking of making the move to the Middle East. John, it's been a pleasure having you on the Money Side Up podcast today.
Thank you both very much. It's been a pleasure, and look forward to next time. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
Well, I did preface that interview that it was going to be an excellent one, diving into John's story, and one of my favorites so far. I think I love listening to John and the way he explains his stories and making that move overseas to Dubai and then now Saudi Arabia, now starting his own business. He seems to be someone who's always motivated to take on a challenge, which is inspiring for, I'm sure, myself and a lot of our listeners. But look, guys, as always, the podcast comes out on the final Wednesday of every month. As always, we interview an expert, but really we do this podcast for you, the listener. So if you ever want us to focus on a topic or interview someone specific, please let us know. We love hearing from our listeners. You can hear the podcast on any of our any major service that you get your podcast from. So whether it's Apple or Spotify or YouTube. And yeah, really, really just want to emphasize, we do love hearing from our listeners. So if you do ever have a topic you want us to delve into or something to explore, please let us know.
Thanks, Will. And of course, if it is of value, please do leave us a review. 5 stars, please, of course. If there's something you feel that we're missing and not diving into each month, then of course, let us know. At the end of the day, we do this for you, as Will said. We want this to be as valuable as possible. So any ways we can improve, let us know. Let somebody else know about the podcast. If you're getting value from this, finding it helpful, it's delving into areas and topics that you're finding useful, please do spread the word. But until next time, thank you very much for tuning in. And I look forward to seeing you the next one.
Until next time, guys.